The following brief has been created with open source information found in books as well as on the internet. However, do take it with a pinch of salt, however, as some aspects have been kept secret due to said country's Official Secrets Act, or we just don't know, and sometimes the best place is actually Wikipedia. So with that said and done, let's get started with today's video. The Benson class would be the final pre-war design before the start of World War II. The Benson would be a follow-on from the Sims class that preceded them. However, they would come with an extra funnel and a new layout of their machinery, with a separate boiler and engine room, designed to give them a better survivability in case of a torpedo hit. The design that would be approved would be displacing 1,620 tons as standard, which is 50 more than the preceding Sims, and 2,474 tons at full load. They'd be 106 metres long, 11 metre beam, and have a 3.6 metre draft. The ships would be powered by 4 Babcock and Wilcox boilers, powering 2 geared steam turbines, propelling 2 screws for 33 knots when at full load, but on trials, the ships could make 37.5 knots. And finally, the ship would have a range of about 6,500 nautical miles at 12 knots. The ship's complement would be about 208 personnel, and this would increase to 276 in wartime. The ship's weapons loadout would consist of 5 single 5-inch 38 caliber dual-purpose guns, 2 forward and 3 aft, in the third facing forward, capable of hitting aircraft out of the sky at 16 kilometers at 760 meters per second. 3 turrets would be in closed mounts, and 2 will be in open mounts. 2 quintuple 21-inch torpedo tubes located on the centerline, capable of firing the utterly poor Mark 14 torpedo. 16 50 caliber machine guns and 2 depth charge racks rounded out the loadout. Overall, 30 ships would be ordered and completed. The first 6 ships would be the Benson, Mayo, Madison, Lansdale, Hilary P. Jones, and the Charles F. Hughes. The other 24 ships would be known as the Bristol Subclass, comprising of the Laffey, Woodworth, Fahrenholt, Bailey, Bancroft, Barton, Champlain, Meade, Murphy, Parker, Cadwell, Coghlan, Fraser, Grenzenvoort, Gillespie, Hobby, Kulk, Kendrick, Lorb, Mackenzie, McClellan, Nield, and Ordrano. Wow, some of those names were quite hard to pronounce. Anyway, these latter 24 vessels would be armed slightly differently, and they would have 4 instead of 5 5-inch guns, 2 dual 40mm Bofors, 7 20mm Oerlikon autocannons, 1 quintuple torpedo launcher, 4 to 6 K depth charge throwers, as well as the 2 depth charge racks. So the Benson class would be designed and built as an improved design over the Sims. However, they would bring over the utterly bad stability that the Sims had. And this was basically what American destroyers had from the Farragut's all the way up to the Gleaves class. Just due to the fact that the ships were just slightly top heavy and caused bad stability. Especially in these cases, they were a little less stable than the Sims. The advantage that the Bensons would possess over the Sims, which was quite evident from the drawing board, was the ships were flexible and possessed an increased survivability. And this would play into the Navy's minds when tensions started to build in Europe due to Hitler's expansion of the Third Reich. By the outbreak of war in Europe, Benson and Mayo had been laid down, with Benson 3 months from being launched. The first 6 vessels would be laid down between May 16, 1938 and January 3rd, 1939. With commissioning between July 25th, 1940 and September 18th, 1940. The first 6 ships would operate in and around the east coast of the continental United States, as well as the Caribbean, conducting neutrality patrols. After the declaration of war with Nazi Germany and their allies in the European theatre, these vessels would operate in the Atlantic and Mediterranean. There they would take part in convoy escort duties, as well as the occasional landing support in North Africa, Italy, as well as southern France. All bar Lansdale would be sent to the Pacific in early 1945 due to the lack of naval support in the region. Lansdale would not join her sisters, and she would be sunk by aircraft whilst escorting a convoy in the Mediterranean. Her story will be its own video at some point. The remaining ships would survive the war, with Benson being transferred to Taiwan along with the destroyer Hilary P. Jones in February of 1954. They would serve until 1975 and 1974 respectively, when they would be scrapped. Mayo would be decommissioned and scrapped in May of 1972. Charles F. Hughes and Madison would be sunk as targets in March and October of 1969. The Bristol Subclass would be laid down between January 13th, 1941 and July 25th, 1942, with no ships commissioning before the commencement of war with Japan. The first ship out of the Bristol Subclass would be the Laffey, and all these ships would serve in the Pacific. These vessels would take part in nearly every naval engagement in the Pacific campaign, with some select ships being lost due to naval gunfire, and one would even lose half the ship due to a collision. Laffey would have one of the short careers of the class, being launched at the end of March 1942 and sinking on November 13th of the same year from concentrated fire from the battleship Hiei. Alongside the Laffey, the Barton would be lost in the same engagement, being sunk by the destroyer Amatsukaze, after spending just under 6 months in service. The Murphy would be losing half the ship due to a collision with the steamship Bulk Oil. She would be cut in half just after the forward funnel, but after some excellent damage control efforts by her crew, she wouldn't sink. She would be towed alongside New York and have a new bow rebuilt. After being a complete ship again, she would join her sisters that had not been sunk in continuing the American push towards the Japanese home islands. Throughout the remaining Pacific campaign, these destroyers would take part in convoy escort duties, carrier group screens to the Enterprise and Saratoga, to name a few, as well as sinking multiple ships in the Tokyo Express during the Guadalcanal campaign. Many ships would suffer damage, many would come off unscathed. However, by the end of the war, these ships would all be decommissioned. Wadsworth would be transferred to the Italian Navy, where in this guise she would be decommissioned and scrapped in 1971. Bailey, Boyle, Meade, Grasavort, Gillespie, Hobby, Cork, Kendrick and Mackenzie would be sunk as targets. The rest would be sold for scrap within 2 decades after the end of the Second World War. Thank you very much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. Before you go, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with my latest videos, as well as commenting, and if you want to, subscribe to the Patreon page to support the channel. All I need to say is, here's a sneak peek at next week's video.